My mother called me 3 days before Thanksgiving and said 7 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about family. Don't come home this year. Natalie doesn't want drama. No explanation. No apology. Just a door slammed shut on 27 years of trying to belong. I spent that Thanksgiving alone at a restaurant in Boston, watching happy families laugh together while I fought back tears over a cold turkey dinner. I had no idea that the strangers at the next table would become the family I'd always dreamed of. I had no idea that 5 years later, they'd be introduced at my wedding as the parents of the bride while my biological parents stood outside the gates, uninvited, realizing they'd been replaced in every way that matters. And I had no idea that the woman who saved me that night had been watching my family for years, waiting for the moment I'd be ready to hear the truth. But before I tell you what happened, let me take you back to the beginning. Because this story doesn't start with a phone call. It starts with a little girl who learned at 7 years old that some children are loved and others are tolerated. My name is Claire Montgomery. I'm 32 years old. And I was raised by people who saw me as an obligation, not a daughter. I grew up in Westport, Connecticut. Money, big houses, country clubs, the kind of town where your zip code mattered more than your character. The Montgomery family had money. Not generational wealth, but comfortable. My father, Peter Montgomery, owned a chain of car dealerships across New England. By the time I was born, he was pulling in about $2 million a year. My mother, Diane Montgomery, didn't work. She managed the household, which meant managing appearances, making sure everything looked perfect from the outside, even when it was rotting from the inside. And then there were the daughters. Natalie, 3 years older than me. Beautiful, popular, effortlessly charming. The daughter my parents showed off at dinner parties. And me, Claire, the afterthought. I learned I wasn't wanted when I was 7 years old. Not from my parents. From a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. It was late at night. I'd come downstairs for water and heard voices in my father's study. I don't know what we were thinking, my mother was saying. 2 kids is too much. We can barely manage Natalie's schedule as it is. My father's response was tired. Resigned. Claire's easy enough. She doesn't need much attention. She keeps herself busy. That's not the point, Peter. We only ever wanted one child. You know that. I stood in the hallway holding my empty glass. 7 years old. And I'd just learned I was a mistake. The pattern started small. Natalie got the bigger bedroom. The one with the bay window and the walk-in closet. I got the room at the end of the hall, next to the water heater that clanked all night. Natalie got piano lessons at $120 an hour. I asked for art classes. My mother said we couldn't afford it. When Natalie turned 13, my parents threw her a party at the country club. 100 guests. A DJ. A 3-tier cake. When I turned 13, we had dinner at Olive Garden. Just the 4 of us. My mother forgot to order a cake. It's not about the money, my father said when I asked why Natalie's party had been so much bigger. It's about what's appropriate for each child. What he meant was, Natalie deserves to be celebrated. You don't. But there was one person who noticed. Mrs. Helen Carver. My 7th grade English teacher. She was older, probably in her 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd been teaching at Westport Academy for 30 years. One afternoon, she kept me after class. Claire, she said, closing the door. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. I gripped my backpack straps. Okay. Are things all right at home? My stomach dropped. Fine. Everything's fine. She studied me for a long moment. I've been teaching a long time, and I've learned to recognize when a child is being overlooked. I'm not. She pulled out a folder. Inside were 2 forms. Emergency contact sheets we'd filled out at the beginning of the year. This is your sister's form. Mrs. Carver pointed. Your parents listed for emergency contacts. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, family, friends. She pulled out mine. This is yours. 2 contacts. Your parents. That's it. Maybe they forgot. For 3 years in a row? She looked at me with something like sadness. Claire, every year your parents fill out Natalie's forms completely. Every year, yours are incomplete. I didn't know what to say. If you ever need someone to talk to, someone outside your family, I'm here. Okay. I nodded. But I never went back to her office. Because at 13, I still believed that if I was just better, just quieter, just easier, my parents would eventually love me the way they loved Natalie. I was wrong. The financial disparity became impossible to ignore as we got older. When Natalie turned 16, my parents bought her a BMW. Brand new. White with tan leather interior. $38,000. When I turned 16, my father handed me the keys to his 2004 Honda Accord. 170,000 miles. Smelled like old coffee. This was your grandfather's car, he said. You should be grateful. I was grateful. I told myself I was grateful. But gratitude doesn't erase the feeling of watching your sister post Instagram photos of her new car while you're driving a vehicle that breaks down twice a month. College applications revealed the truth in numbers I couldn't ignore. Natalie applied to Yale, Princeton, and Georgetown. All private. All expensive. My parents hired a college consultant. $5,000 for application coaching. They took Natalie on campus tours. Flew to New Haven, Princeton, DC, stayed in nice hotels. Made a vacation out of it. When it was my turn, my mother handed me a stack of brochures for state schools. We think it makes more sense for you to stay local, she said. Save money on housing. What about private schools? She looked at me like I'd asked for a yacht. Claire, we've already spent so much on Natalie's education. We have to be realistic. Realistic meant Natalie got a $160,000 education fund. I got told to take out student loans. I found out about the college funds by accident. Senior year, I needed a copy of my birth certificate for financial aid forms. My mother told me to check the filing cabinet in my father's office. I found my birth certificate. I also found the investment account statements. 2 accounts. Both with the same bank. Natalie Montgomery Education Trust. $164,892. Claire Montgomery Education Trust. $0. I stood there staring at the paper. Natalie's account had been opened the day she was born. Monthly contributions for 18 years. Mine didn't exist. I confronted my mother that night. Why does Natalie have a college fund and I don't? She didn't even look up from her magazine. We started that fund when we only had one child. By the time you came along, things were different. Different how? The economy. Your father's business. We couldn't afford to do the same for both of you. But you're still contributing to Natalie's fund. I'd seen the statements. $500 a month. For 18 years. My mother set down her magazine. Claire, I'm not going to apologize for prioritizing our first child. That's just how it works. That's just how it works. Not in good families. Not in families where both children are loved equally. Just in ours. Before we continue, please subscribe to Family Secret TV and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I see everything and your support means the world to me. Thank you. I went to UConn. State school. In-state tuition. I worked 3 part-time jobs to cover what financial aid didn't. Graduated with $43,000 in student loan debt. Natalie went to Georgetown. Graduated debt-free. My parents attended her graduation. Front row seats. Took her to dinner at a 5-star restaurant. Posted photos on Facebook with the caption, "So proud of our Georgetown graduate." My graduation was on a Sunday. My parents said they couldn't make it. My father had a golf tournament. My mother had a spa day booked. You understand, right? My mother said over the phone. We've been to so many graduations. It's not like it's your first degree. It was my only degree. I walked across that stage alone. No one cheered when they called my name. After college, I moved to Boston. Got a job at a marketing firm. Started as an assistant, worked my way up to junior account manager within 2 years. I was good at my job. Really good. I had a gift for seeing patterns in data, understanding what made people respond to certain messages. By the time I was 25, I was managing accounts worth 6 figures. By 27, I was making $78,000 a year. Not rich, but comfortable. More than enough to cover my studio apartment in Cambridge and start chipping away at my student loans. I'd built a life. A good life. Without my family's help. But I still went home for holidays. I still called my mother every week. I still sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts. Because some part of me, the 7-year-old who'd overheard that conversation, still believed that if I tried hard enough, I could earn their love. Natalie got engaged when she was 28. His name was Trevor. Investment banker. Family money. The kind of guy who wore boat shoes without socks and talked about his portfolio at dinner parties. My parents loved him. The engagement party was at the country club. 200 guests. Passed hors d'oeuvres. Open bar. I got the invitation 3 weeks before the event. Natalie had been engaged for 6 months. I called my mother. Why am I just now getting invited to Natalie's engagement party? Her voice was tight. Irritated. Natalie wanted to keep the guest list small at first. Just immediate family and close friends. I'm her sister. You're also very opinionated, Claire. Natalie didn't want any negativity on her special day. I haven't even met Trevor. How could I have opinions about him? See? That tone right there. That's exactly what she was worried about. I hung up. Went to the party anyway. Stood in the corner drinking cheap wine while relatives I barely knew congratulated Natalie on her perfect engagement to her perfect fiancé. My mother introduced me to distant cousins as our other daughter, Claire. She lives in Boston. Not this is Claire. She's doing amazing work in marketing. Not this is Claire. We're so proud of her. Just our other daughter. The afterthought. The wedding planning was worse. Natalie asked our cousin Melissa to be her maid of honor. She asked 4 friends to be bridesmaids. She didn't ask me to be anything. When I called to ask about it, she sighed like I was being difficult. Claire, I wanted my bridal party to be people who've been there for me through everything. I'm your sister. You're also critical. Remember when you said Trevor's job was morally questionable? That hurt. I'd made a joke about investment bankers. Once. At a family dinner. 6 months ago. Natalie, I'm sorry if that came across wrong. But I'm your sister. Don't I at least get to be part of the wedding? You can be a guest. That's still being part of it. I wasn't in the wedding. I was seated at table 12. At the back. Next to my parents' accountant and his wife, who I'd never met. Natalie posted 50 photos on Instagram the next day. I wasn't in a single one. Then came the phone call that changed everything. November 21st. 3 days before Thanksgiving. 2023. I was in my apartment in Cambridge, packing for the trip home to Connecticut. I'd already bought my train ticket. Non-refundable, of course. My phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I answered, expecting logistics. What time to arrive? What to bring? Claire. Her voice was flat. Cold. Hey, Mom. I was just about to. I need to tell you something. My stomach dropped. That tone never meant anything good. Okay. Don't come home for Thanksgiving this year. I actually laughed. I thought she was joking. What do you mean? Natalie's pregnant. She doesn't want any stress. I gripped the phone tighter. Stress? What stress? I haven't even seen Natalie in 6 months. Exactly. And that's better for everyone. You know how you get. How I get? My mother's voice hardened. You ask too many questions. You make things about yourself. Natalie doesn't need that right now. She's high risk. Doctor's orders. Mom, I haven't done anything to Natalie. See? That attitude right there. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I sat down on my bed. The room felt like it was tilting. Mom, I already bought my train ticket. Then get a refund. But Thanksgiving is in 3 days. Then I guess you'll have to make other plans. Her tone left no room for negotiation. Natalie is pregnant. She doesn't need drama. You understand? The line went dead. I sat on my bed staring at my phone. 27 years old. And my mother had just told me I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving because I might cause drama by existing. I called my father. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some small part of me still believed he'd stand up for me. Just this once. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. Hey, kiddo. His voice was cautious. He already knew. Dad, did Mom tell you? A long pause. I could hear the TV in the background. Probably a football game. She mentioned it. And you're okay with this? You don't think maybe I should be allowed at Thanksgiving with my own family? Another pause. Longer this time. You know how your mother is, Claire. She's just trying to keep the peace. By excluding me? It's not like that. Then what is it like, Dad? Tell me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're all choosing Natalie over me. Again. Silence. I could hear him breathing. I could almost see him sitting in his recliner, rubbing his forehead the way he always did when he wanted to disappear from a conversation. Dad, do you want me there? 5 seconds passed. 10. He cleared his throat. I think it's better if you listen to your mother this year. Something inside me went quiet. Not sad. Not angry. Just empty. Okay, Dad. Claire, don't be like. I said okay. I hung up. He didn't call back. I sat in my apartment as the sun went down, watching the shadows stretch across my floor. My father had a chance to choose me, to say one word in my defense. And he chose silence. I thought about all the times he'd stood by and watched my mother prioritize Natalie. All the times he could have said something, done something, and instead he'd just looked away. He wasn't neutral. He was complicit. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit in my apartment and feel sorry for myself. I wasn't going to let them turn me into what they'd always said I was: dramatic, difficult, too much. I grabbed my laptop and searched for restaurants open on Thanksgiving in Boston. If I was going to eat dinner alone, I was going to do it somewhere with real food. With light. With life. I found a place called Harborview Grill. One of those old Boston institutions. Dark wood. Brass fixtures. The kind of place that still had cloth napkins and candles on every table. I made a reservation for one. And I tried not to think about what it meant that I was spending Thanksgiving surrounded by strangers instead of the family I'd spent 27 years trying to please. Thanksgiving Day arrived gray and cold. I woke up to the sound of my upstairs neighbor's family arriving. Footsteps overhead. Children laughing. The muffled warmth of voices I couldn't make out. The smell of something delicious drifted through the vents. Someone was making stuffing. I made instant coffee and sat by the window, watching the snow fall on the empty street below. My phone stayed silent all morning. No calls. No texts. Not even a happy Thanksgiving from anyone in my family. Around noon, I made the mistake of opening Instagram. Natalie had posted a photo. The whole family around the dining table. Mom, Dad, Natalie, her husband Trevor, all smiling. Everyone looked happy. Relaxed. The caption read, "Grateful for my people. The ones who matter most." I zoomed in on the photo. Counted the place settings. For adults. For chairs. There wasn't even an empty seat where I should have been. They hadn't just excluded me. They'd erased me like I'd never existed at all. I closed the app. Stared at the ceiling. And made myself get ready for dinner at a restaurant where I knew absolutely no one. Harborview Grill was everything I'd hoped for and nothing I was prepared for. When I pushed through the door, the warmth hit me like a wave. The smell of roasted turkey and fresh bread. The soft clink of glasses. The hum of conversation. And everywhere, families. Couples with grandparents. Parents with children. Groups of friends who laughed like they'd known each other forever. The restaurant hummed with the sound of people who belong somewhere. The hostess looked at me with barely concealed pity. Just one tonight? Just one. She led me to a tiny two-top in the corner. Squeezed between the kitchen door and a large family that took up 3 tables pushed together. I could have touched their chairs if I reached out. Your server will be right with you. I sat down. Opened the menu. Tried to look like this was a choice. Like I'd wanted to be here alone. The family next to me was celebrating hard. An older couple at the head of the table. Probably in their late 60s. A middle-aged couple with 2 kids in their teens. And a younger woman, maybe 30, who kept making everyone laugh. 3 generations. Easy. They passed dishes back and forth without asking. They interrupted each other in the way that only people who truly love each other can. One of the teenagers spilled cranberry sauce on the tablecloth. Everyone laughed. No one got angry. No one made her feel bad. I watched them out of the corner of my eye and felt something crack open in my chest. This is what family is supposed to look like. The server arrived with a bread basket and a tight smile. "I'll have the Thanksgiving special, please." She nodded and disappeared. My food arrived 10 minutes later. Golden turkey. Cranberry sauce. Perfect mashed potatoes. It looked like a magazine photo. I couldn't taste any of it. I sat there pushing food around my plate, trying not to look at the family beside me, trying not to think about my own family gathered around their table in Connecticut, laughing and passing the gravy without a single thought about the daughter they'd discarded. And suddenly, I understood something I'd been avoiding for 27 years. This wasn't about Thanksgiving. This wasn't about Natalie's pregnancy. This was about a pattern so deep it had shaped my entire life. I had spent 27 years trying to earn a place at their table, bending myself into smaller and smaller shapes, swallowing my hurt, apologizing for having feelings, staying quiet when I should have spoken. And what had it gotten me? A corner table, a meal alone, an Instagram photo with no empty chair. The tears came before I could stop them. I turned my face toward the window, hoping no one would notice. I grabbed my napkin and pressed it to my eyes, trying to be invisible, trying to disappear like I always did. Honey? I froze. A woman's voice. Warm. Concerned. Are you okay? I looked up. The older woman from the family next to me was standing beside my table. Silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun. Kind eyes. A face that somehow looked like it had spent a lifetime actually listening to people. She was looking at me like I mattered. I'm fine, I said automatically. Just allergies. The woman raised one eyebrow. Not judging. Just knowing. Allergies don't usually make people cry into their napkin on Thanksgiving. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. That obvious? Only to someone who's paying attention. Her voice was gentle, but there was steel underneath. The kind of woman who'd seen things. I'm Eleanor. Eleanor Brennan. Claire. Well, Claire. She glanced back at her family, then at me. No one should eat alone on this day. Why don't you come join us? I shook my head immediately. Oh no. I couldn't. I don't want to intrude. You're not intruding. I'm inviting. She smiled. There's a difference. I really appreciate it, but... My husband tells terrible jokes, she continued as if I hadn't spoken. And my son James keeps trying to start political debates. You might as well come suffer with us. From the big table, the older man, her husband I assumed, waved at me. She won't take no for an answer, he called. Trust me. 42 years and I've never won an argument. The younger woman, probably their daughter, grinned. He's not wrong. I looked at my cold turkey. My empty table. My napkin still damp with tears. Then I looked at Eleanor Brennan and her warm eyes and her family that somehow had room for a stranger. Okay, I heard myself say. If you're sure. I'm sure. Eleanor put her hand on my shoulder. Come on. We just opened another bottle of wine and there's way too much pie. I stood up on shaky legs and followed her to the table. Not knowing that this single moment, this small act of kindness from a woman I'd never met, was about to change the entire trajectory of my life. They made room for me like I'd always been there. Someone pulled up a chair. Someone else handed me a plate. Before I could even sit down, I had a glass of wine in my hand and a warm roll on my plate. I'm Robert, the older man said, shaking my hand firmly. This is my wife, Eleanor. Our son James and his wife Rebecca. Their kids, Sophie and Lucas. And our daughter, Mara. Hi. I gave an awkward little wave to the table. I'm Claire. Thank you so much for... What do you do, Claire? James asked, passing me the mashed potatoes. I'm in marketing. Account management, mostly. That's wonderful, Rebecca said. Do you work with any companies we'd know? I rattled off a few client names. Local businesses, a couple regional chains. James's eyes lit up. Wait, you worked on the campaign for Riverside Brewery? That was brilliant. The Craft Your Own Story series? I felt my cheeks warm. That was my concept, actually. Everyone at the table stopped. Looked at me. That campaign was everywhere, Mara said. I must have seen those ads 100 times. For the first time all day, I felt something other than sadness. Pride. The conversation flowed naturally after that. They asked about my work. My life in Boston. Where I grew up. I gave the sanitized version. Connecticut. Moved to Boston for work. Been here about 5 years. Do you get home often? Eleanor asked. Her eyes were sharp. Assessing. Not really, I said carefully. My family and I aren't very close. Everyone at the table went quiet for just a moment. Then Robert raised his glass. Well then. To new friends. And families we choose. Everyone raised their glasses. Including me. After the main course, while the kids ran off to explore the restaurant and the men argued about football, Eleanor moved to the chair next to mine. How are you doing? She asked quietly. Really? I looked down at my plate. Better. This is really nice. Thank you. You're welcome. She took a sip of her wine. But that's not what I asked. Something about her directness made me want to be honest. I'm okay. I'm just having a hard Thanksgiving. Do you want to tell me why you're really here alone? I hesitated. The truth felt too pathetic to say out loud. But Eleanor waited. Patient. No judgment in her eyes. My mom called me 3 days ago, I finally said. Told me not to come home for Thanksgiving. My sister is pregnant and she didn't want drama. Eleanor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Drama? That's what they call it when I ask questions they don't want to answer. Eleanor nodded slowly. I see. It's fine, I added quickly. I mean, it's not fine, but... It's not fine. Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. Can I tell you something I learned in 30 years as a family therapist? I blinked. You're a therapist? Retired. Family systems therapy. She smiled. I've seen every kind of family dysfunction you can imagine. And I've learned that the people who accuse you of causing drama are usually the ones creating it. They just need someone to blame. The words hit me like a physical force. You're not the problem, Claire. Eleanor put her hand over mine. You never were. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. Those were the words I'd needed to hear my entire life. The evening wound down slowly, the way good dinners do. Pie was served. Coffee was poured. The kids fell asleep on Rebecca's lap, exhausted from running circles around the restaurant. When the check came, I reached for my wallet. Robert waved me off. Please, he said. Our treat. I can't let you. You can and you will. He smiled. Consider it a Thanksgiving tradition. We always buy dinner for new friends. As we gathered our coats and prepared to leave, Eleanor pressed something into my hand. A small card. Cream-colored with elegant black text. I looked down. Eleanor Brennan, LMFT. Family Systems Therapy, retired. Below that, a phone number and an address in Brookline. If you ever need to talk, she said, call me. I mean it. Thank you. Robert appeared beside us, shrugging on his coat. Sunday dinners. Every week at our place. You're welcome anytime. I shook my head. That's so kind, but I couldn't. She could, Mara said, joining the group. And she should. Mom never says things she doesn't mean. Trust me. Eleanor squeezed my hand. Family isn't blood, Claire. It's showing up. I stood there in the restaurant lobby, holding a business card from a woman I'd met 3 hours ago, receiving an open invitation from a family I had no claim to. Outside, the snow was falling harder. Through the window, I could see families hurrying to their cars. Children carried on shoulders. Grandparents clutching to-go containers of leftover pie. I looked back at the Brennans. Robert helping Eleanor with her scarf. James herding sleepy children. Mara waiting by the door with an expectant look. Okay, I said. Maybe I'll stop by sometime. Eleanor smiled like she'd known I'd say yes all along. I had no idea I'd just met my future family. I didn't go to Sunday dinner the next week. Or the week after that. It felt too strange. Too forward. Too much like I was imposing on someone else's family. But Eleanor called. Just to check in, she said. Just to see how I was doing. By early December, I finally accepted the invitation. That first Sunday, I stood on the Brennan's porch in Brookline for 5 full minutes before I worked up the courage to knock. The house was exactly what I'd imagined. A beautiful Victorian with a wraparound porch and lights in every window. It looked like the kind of place where good things happened. Eleanor opened the door before I could change my mind. There you are. She pulled me into a hug like it was the most natural thing in the world. We saved you a seat. That was the first of many Sundays. Over the next 6 months, I became a regular at the Brennan dinner table. Robert taught me to play chess, even though I lost every single game. Eleanor showed me her secret pie crust recipe, the one she swore she'd never written down. James's kids started calling me Aunt Claire without anyone telling them to. And Mara and I became friends. Real friends. The kind who texted random thoughts at 2 in the morning and argued about movies and sat next to each other at dinner without anyone having to arrange it. I didn't hear from my biological family once. Not a call. Not a text. Not even a Christmas card. But for the first time in my life, I didn't notice. Because for the first time, I wasn't performing for love. I wasn't shrinking myself to fit into someone else's expectations. I was just loved. It felt like finally coming home. If you're watching this and you've ever been the scapegoat in your family, if you've been told you're too much or too sensitive or always causing drama just because you asked to be treated fairly, I see you. I want to know, have you ever been blamed for ruining family events just by existing? Type your answer in the comments. And if this story is hitting close to home, please hit that like button so more people can find it. Now, let me tell you what happened next. One spring afternoon, about 8 months after that first Thanksgiving, Eleanor and I were sitting on her back porch. The garden was just starting to bloom. Tulips pushing up through the soil. Birds fighting over the feeder. Robert was inside watching a game with James. We could hear them shouting at the TV. Have you heard from your parents? Eleanor asked. I watched a robin land on the fence. No. And I haven't reached out either. She nodded. No judgment in her eyes. Do you want to? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Sometimes I admit it. In the middle of the night, mostly. I'll think about calling my mom and trying to explain. But then I remember there's nothing to explain. She knows what she did. She just doesn't think it was wrong. That's a hard thing to accept. It is. I pulled my cardigan tighter. I keep waiting to feel guilty. Everyone says you should forgive your family no matter what. Blood is thicker than water and all that. You know I've never believed that. Eleanor took a sip of her tea. In my career, I helped a lot of people recognize the difference between families that heal and families that harm. I turned to look at her. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who can't love you the way you deserve. She paused. And sometimes the most beautiful thing you can do is build a new family with people who choose you on purpose. I didn't fully understand what she was hinting at. Not yet. Something to think about, Eleanor said. Whenever you're ready. She patted my hand and changed the subject to her tomato plants. But her words stayed with me. They would take root slowly. And bloom at exactly the right time. It happened so naturally that I almost didn't notice it happening. 2 years after that first Thanksgiving, Mara and I weren't just friends anymore. We were something more. Something that had grown so gradually that when we finally acknowledged it, it felt less like a beginning and more like a recognition of what had always been there. She asked me to dinner at Harborview Grill, the same restaurant where we'd met. This feels circular, I said, sliding into the booth. That's the point. Mara was nervous. I could tell by the way she kept adjusting her napkin. I wanted to bring you back to where it all started. Where what started? She reached across the table and took my hand. Claire, I've been trying to figure out how to say this for months. She took a breath. I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you. Every single day. My heart stopped. Mara, I know your family hurt you. I know you're scared of people who are supposed to love you letting you down. Her eyes were steady on mine. But I'm not going anywhere. I never have been. She pulled out a small velvet box. Claire Montgomery. Will you marry me? I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I looked at this woman who'd been my friend first, my confidant second, my rock through 2 years of healing. And I saw my future. Yes, I whispered. Yes. She slipped the ring on my finger. The restaurant erupted in applause. I'd been so focused on Mara, I hadn't even noticed the other diners watching. And then I saw them. In the corner booth. Robert and Eleanor. Champagne already poured. Beaming at us like they'd known all along. Mom couldn't resist, Mara laughed. I was going to officially become a Brennan. The wedding planning began immediately. Venue options. Catering tastings. Flower consultations. It was overwhelming and exciting and everything I'd never let myself dream about. But one question kept me up at night. The wedding invitations would need a line for parents of the bride. And I had no idea what to write there. Peter and Diane Montgomery. They hadn't spoken to me in over 2 years. Hadn't called on my birthday. Hadn't acknowledged my existence in any way. I couldn't put their names on my wedding invitation. They hadn't earned that honor. I was pacing in the Brennans' living room one evening when Eleanor found me. "What's troubling you, sweetheart?" I told her about the invitation. About the impossible line I couldn't figure out how to fill. Eleanor sat down and patted the cushion beside her. "There's something I mentioned to you once. About building families we choose. Do you remember?" I nodded slowly. "You said sometimes the bravest thing is to walk away and build something new." "Adult adoption," Eleanor said gently. "It's a legal process where a consenting adult is formally adopted by another family. It creates a legal parent-child relationship. New birth certificate. New legal next of kin status. Everything." My heart was pounding. That's a real thing? Very real. Though not many people know about it. I looked at this woman who'd pulled me into her family on the loneliest night of my life. Who'd fed me Sunday dinners and taught me about pie crust and shown me what a mother could be. "Eleanor," I said, my voice cracking. "Would you and Robert consider?" She pulled me into her arms before I could finish the sentence. "We've considered you our daughter since the first Thanksgiving," she whispered. "We were just waiting for you to be ready." The adoption process took several months. Paperwork. Court appearances. Legal filings. But with Eleanor guiding me through every step, it felt less like bureaucracy and more like a ceremony. On a cold day in February, I stood in a courtroom in Suffolk County with Robert and Eleanor beside me. The judge reviewed the documents. Asked me a series of questions. "Miss Montgomery, do you enter into this adoption freely and of your own will?" "I do." "Do you understand that this will create a permanent legal parent-child relationship with Robert and Eleanor Brennan?" "I do." "Do you wish to change your legal name to reflect this adoption?" I looked at Eleanor. She was crying. I looked at Robert. He was smiling. "Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to be Claire Brennan." The judge signed the final order. "Congratulations, Miss Brennan. You are now legally the daughter of Robert and Eleanor Brennan." I walked out of that courthouse with a new birth certificate. A new name. A new family on paper and in my heart. That night, the Brennans threw a small celebration dinner. Just family. All of us. Robert made a toast. To Claire. Our daughter. Not by birth, but by choice. Which makes it even more real. I cried through the entire meal. Happy tears. The first happy tears I'd cried in years. The wedding was set for the following June. We sent out invitations with the line I'd agonized over now proudly printed. Parents of the bride, Robert and Eleanor Brennan. I should have known the Montgomery family would eventually find out. 3 months before the wedding, my phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. The first message from her in nearly 3 years. "Did you know Claire is getting married?" I stared at the screen. Then I blocked the number. A week later, my mother called. 5 times in one day. I let every call go to voicemail. Finally, a text. "Why didn't you tell us? We're your family. Call me back immediately." I read it twice. Then I deleted it. 3 years of silence. 3 years of pretending I didn't exist. And now, suddenly, they remembered they had another daughter. I wasn't angry. I'd moved past anger long ago. I was just tired. Mara found me staring at my phone that evening. "Everything okay?" My biological family found out about the wedding. She sat down beside me. "What do you want to do?" "Nothing." I put the phone away. I don't owe them anything. Not an explanation. Not an invitation. Nothing. She nodded and pulled me close. "Whatever you decide, I support you." But we both knew this wasn't over. The Montgomerys weren't the kind of family who accepted being ignored. The question was, what would they do about it? She showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday afternoon. I was working from home, reviewing client presentations at my kitchen table, when the doorbell rang. I opened it without checking the peephole. A mistake I wouldn't make again. "Claire." My mother stood in my hallway. She looked older than I remembered. Grayer. More tired. But her eyes held the same disappointed expression I'd spent my childhood trying to erase. "Mom." The word felt foreign in my mouth. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? She pushed past me into the apartment without being invited. What are you doing? Getting married without telling your own mother? We haven't spoken in 3 years. And whose fault is that? I closed the door slowly. Counted to 5. Yours. It was your fault. You told me not to come home. That was one Thanksgiving. You can't still be upset about that. I'm not upset. I kept my voice calm. I've moved on. Diane's eyes swept across my living room, landing on the photos on my bookshelf. Me and Mara at the beach. Me and Eleanor making pie. The whole Brennan family at Christmas. Me right in the center. Who are these people? My family. Her face contorted. I am your family. You were. I met her gaze evenly. You chose not to be. Remember? Natalie didn't want drama. That was years ago. And in those years, you never once called. Never checked if I was alive. Never acknowledged my existence. I felt eerily calm. So no, Mom. You don't get to show up now and act like you have a claim on me. I want an invitation to the wedding. No. Her jaw dropped. Excuse me? You heard me. I walked to the door and opened it. You don't get to erase me and then demand a seat at my table. She didn't leave. Instead, she pulled out her phone. Scrolled to something. Shoved the screen in my face. Look at this. It was a Facebook post from one of my distant cousins. A photo of my wedding invitation. Someone had shared it publicly. And in the comments, dozens of relatives I barely knew were discussing it. Who are Robert and Eleanor Brennan? Where are Peter and Diane? Did Claire disown her own parents? This is so disrespectful. My mother's voice was shaking. Do you see what you've done? You've humiliated us. In front of the entire family. I looked at the screen. Then at her. I didn't humiliate you, I said quietly. I just told the truth. Robert and Eleanor are my legal parents. You're not. Legal parents? She looked like I'd slapped her. I was adopted. 2 years ago. I'm Claire Brennan now. Legally. My mother sank into my couch without asking. You what? I replaced you. I kept my voice steady. Completely. Officially. You abandoned me, so I found a family who wanted me. We never abandoned you. You told me not to come home. You chose Natalie every single time for 27 years. You gave her a college fund and left me with student debt. You forgot my graduation. You seated me with strangers at her wedding. I walked closer. You erased me first, Mom. I just made it official. She left 10 minutes later. Didn't say goodbye. Just walked out and slammed the door. I sat on my couch, shaking. Not from fear. From relief. I'd said everything I'd ever wanted to say. And I meant every word. The wedding day dawned golden and perfect. June in the Berkshires. A small inn with gardens that looked like something out of a fairy tale. We'd chosen an outdoor ceremony with a reception in a restored barn. Everything decorated with white roses and wildflowers. In the bridal suite, I stood before a full-length mirror while Eleanor adjusted my veil. You look beautiful, she said softly. Absolutely beautiful. I looked at my reflection. The woman looking back at me was calmer, stronger than the girl who'd sat alone in a restaurant 3 years ago. That girl hadn't believed she deserved to be loved. This woman knew better. On the vanity beside me sat a copy of the wedding program. I picked it up, reading the line I'd never thought I'd be able to write. Parents of the bride, Robert and Eleanor Brennan. Underneath, in smaller text, the family who chose her and whom she chose in return. Eleanor noticed me looking. Are you nervous about marrying Mara? No. I set down the program. About what might happen, a little. I'd hired security for the wedding. A quiet precaution. After my mother's visit to my apartment, I knew there was a chance she'd try something. Eleanor put her hands on my shoulders. Whatever happens today, you have a family who chose you. We will always choose you. Never forget that. I hugged her tight. I love you, Mom. It was the first time I'd called her that. The word came out naturally. Like it had always been waiting. Eleanor's eyes glistened. I love you too, sweetheart. My daughter. The ceremony was everything I'd dreamed of. Mara waiting at the end of the aisle, looking nervous and beautiful in her ivory suit. Robert walking me toward her, steady and proud. The vows we'd written ourselves. Words that made half the guests cry and the other half pretend they weren't crying. When Mara slipped the ring on my finger and the officiant pronounced us married, I felt something click into place. Like the last piece of a puzzle I'd been trying to solve my entire life. The reception was in full swing when the security guard found me. Mrs. Brennan. He appeared at my elbow, discreet and professional. There are 3 people at the gate. They claim to be your family. They don't have invitations. I'd expected this. Part of me had been waiting for it all day. Mara appeared beside me. What's going on? My biological family is here. Her expression hardened. I'll handle it. No. I took her hand. This is my moment. I'll handle it. I considered my options. I could have them removed. I could pretend they weren't there. I could avoid the confrontation entirely. But something in me said no. Let them see. Let them see what they lost. Let them see the family who stepped up when they stepped away. Let them witness the life I built without them. Let them in, I told the security guard. But don't seat them. They can stand in the back if they want. But they're not guests. They're spectators. Are you sure? Mara asked. I'm sure. Hey, this is the moment. Before the big reveal, I have a question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you have let your biological parents into your wedding? Type yes or no in the comments. I want to know what you would have done. And if you're dying to see what happens next, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Now, let me tell you about the moment everything changed. The MC stepped up to the microphone. The music softened. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. The room quieted. Guests turned toward the front. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Before we continue the celebration, I'd like to introduce some very special people. I watched my biological family from across the room. My mother, father, and Natalie stood near the entrance. Uncertain. Out of place. Diane was craning her neck, trying to see. Peter stood behind her, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. Natalie held Trevor's arm, her pregnant belly visible under her dress. They had no idea what was coming. Please join me in welcoming the parents of the bride. Diane straightened up. I could see her preparing to acknowledge the introduction. To accept the recognition she believed was rightfully hers. Robert and Eleanor Brennan. The room erupted in applause. Robert and Eleanor stood from the head table, beaming, waving to the guests. People cheered. Someone whistled. The photographer snapped photos. And across the room, my mother's face went white. I watched it happen in slow motion. The confusion. The disbelief. The moment she realized what those words meant. Robert and Eleanor Brennan. The family who chose Claire and whom Claire chose in return. Diane grabbed Peter's arm. What did he just say? Peter looked stunned. Speechless. Around them, guests clapped and smiled, completely unaware that the older couple near the entrance had any connection to the bride at all. To everyone else at this wedding, Robert and Eleanor Brennan were simply what they appeared to be. My parents. Diane's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. She looked at the happy couple accepting congratulations. Then at me, standing with my wife. And the truth finally settled over her like a cold wave. She had been replaced. Completely. Officially. Legally. And everyone in this room knew it except her. Diane pushed through the crowd. She reached me just as the applause was dying down. Her face was flushed. Her eyes wild. Natalie and Peter trailed behind her, looking like they wanted to disappear. What is going on? Diane's voice was a harsh whisper. Who are those people? I kept my voice calm. Steady. My legal parents. I was adopted 2 years ago. You what? She actually staggered back a step. You can't just replace us. I didn't replace you, I looked at her evenly. You abandoned me first. We never abandoned you. You told me not to come home. You chose Natalie. Every time. For 27 years. The guests nearest to us had noticed the confrontation. Conversations died. Heads turned. That's not fair, Diane started. Fair? I felt Mara move to my side. A solid, reassuring presence. You want to talk about fair? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was loud enough on its own. I spent 27 years trying to earn a place in your family. You know what I got? An Instagram photo with no empty chair. A Thanksgiving dinner alone. 3 years of silence. I'm still your mother, Diane's voice cracked. Not legally. I held up my left hand. Both rings glinting in the reception lights. Not emotionally. Not anymore. Around us, the room had gone quiet. 150 pairs of eyes watched us. Diane looked around, suddenly aware of the audience. Her cheeks burned red. This is humiliating, she hissed. Then leave, my voice was soft. Final. You showed up uninvited to my wedding. You don't get to be the victim here. Natalie stepped forward. Claire, please. Her voice was small. Uncertain. I didn't know about any of this. I didn't know they treated you that way. I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. She was crying. Actually crying. Not performative tears. Real ones. Yes, you did, I said quietly. You were there for all of it. Every birthday they forgot. Every time they chose you over me. Every moment they made me feel invisible. You could have said something. You never did. Natalie's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I know. And then, for the first time in his entire life, my father spoke up. Claire. His voice was rough. Broken. I turned to look at him. Peter Montgomery had aged more than 3 years should account for. His hair was grayer. His shoulders slumped. But his eyes were wet with tears. I'd never seen my father cry. Not once in 27 years. I'm sorry, he said. I should have done better. Something cracked inside my chest. Not healing. Just recognition of an old wound. I know, Dad. I was a coward. His voice trembled. I always was. I knew how your mother treated you. How Natalie got everything and you got nothing. And I stood there. I let it happen. Diane grabbed his arm. Peter, what are you? He shook her off. Kept his eyes on me. You were my daughter. You were my little girl. And I let them make you feel like you didn't matter. A tear rolled down his cheek. I'm so sorry. The words I'd waited 3 decades to hear. And they came too late. I know you're sorry, Dad. My voice was gentle but firm. But sorry doesn't undo the years you stood by and watched. Sorry doesn't give me back my childhood. Sorry doesn't make this okay. I know, he nodded, wiping his eyes. I know it doesn't. Robert appeared at my shoulder. He didn't say anything. Just placed his hand on my arm. A quiet reminder that I wasn't alone. Diane stared at Robert with barely concealed hostility. You, she spat. You're the one who stole my daughter. Robert's expression didn't change. I didn't steal anything, Mrs. Montgomery. Then what do you call this? Robert stepped forward, positioning himself beside me. Robert Brennan wasn't a confrontational man. In the 3 years I'd known him, I'd never once heard him raise his voice. But when he spoke now, there was steel in his tone that silenced everyone. I think it's time for you folks to leave. Diane's jaw dropped. Who are you to tell us? I'm her father. Robert's voice carried across the quiet reception. Legally and in every way that matters. You stole our daughter. Robert shook his head. Calm. Certain. No, ma'am. We didn't steal anything. You gave her away. We just picked up what you threw out. Diane flinched like she'd been slapped. 3 years ago, Robert continued, this young woman was sitting alone in a restaurant on Thanksgiving because her own family told her she wasn't welcome. My wife invited her to our table. We fed her. We talked to her. We treated her like a human being. He stepped closer to Diane, his voice dropping. Do you know what she told us that night? She said she couldn't remember the last time she felt like she mattered to someone. 27 years old. And she couldn't remember ever feeling wanted by her own family. Diane opened her mouth. No sound came out. We didn't steal your daughter. We just showed her what family is supposed to look like. The rest was her choice. He turned to face the gathered crowd. Now, this is my daughter's wedding day. The happiest day of her life. And I won't let anyone ruin it. He nodded to the security guards who had been standing discreetly nearby. Please escort these people out. As the guards approached, I held up my hand. Wait. Everyone froze. Diane looked at me with something like hope in her eyes. Maybe she thought I was having second thoughts. Maybe she thought I'd relent. I walked toward my biological family. Stopped an arm's length away. Mom. Dad. Natalie. The words still felt strange when directed at them. I need you to understand something. Diane's chin lifted. What? I don't hate you. Whatever she'd expected me to say, that wasn't it. I don't hate you, I repeated. I've made peace with who you are. You're not villains. You're just people who couldn't love me the way I needed to be loved. People who chose comfort over fairness. People who let one daughter become invisible so the other could shine. Peter was crying again. Diane's face was a mask. But I've also made peace with who I am. I stood straighter. And who I am is someone who deserves to be chosen. Not as a backup. Not as an afterthought. Chosen first. I looked at them all. The parents I'd spent my childhood trying to please. The sister who'd let it happen. The family I'd shrunk myself to fit into. You didn't choose me. They did. I gestured to the Brennans. And I choose them. The room was silent. 150 guests watched this moment. Not one of them moved. Diane opened her mouth to speak. I didn't let her. I'm not erasing you from my history. I'm just not giving you a seat at my table anymore. And that's not revenge. That's just the natural consequence of your choices. I nodded to security. Goodbye. As they were escorted out, the wedding guests began to applaud. Not for the drama. For me. For choosing myself. For building something beautiful from the ruins they'd left behind. The rest of the wedding was everything I'd hoped for. We danced. We laughed. We cut the cake while everyone cheered. Mara twirled me around the dance floor until I was dizzy with joy. Eleanor cried through her mother of the bride speech. Robert told terrible jokes that made everyone groan and laugh at the same time. For those few hours, I let myself forget about the confrontation. And just be happy. 2 weeks after the wedding, a handwritten letter arrived at our new apartment. The return address said Natalie Montgomery Collins. My sister's handwriting. Loopy. Perfect. I almost threw it away unopened. But something made me sit down at the kitchen table and read it. Dear Claire, I don't know if you'll read this. Honestly, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But I had to try. I've been going to therapy. Started right after your wedding. My therapist says I need to take accountability for my part in how our family treated you. So here it is. I knew. Mom gave me everything and gave you nothing. I knew about the college fund. I knew you were excluded and erased and made to feel small. And I let it happen. Because it benefited me. Because it was easier. Because I told myself it wasn't my fault if Mom liked me better. But it was my fault that I never stood up for you. That I never questioned why you were always the one left out. That I accepted the good treatment and pretended not to notice you got the opposite. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. And I'm sorry. Your sister, Natalie. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. Mara came home to find me at the kitchen table. What's that? Letter from Natalie. What did she say? That she's sorry. That she finally understands. Does that change anything? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I said finally. It's good that she's working on herself. But it doesn't undo 27 years. And it doesn't mean I owe her a relationship. That's fair. Mara sat down beside me. You get to decide who's in your life. Not guilt. Not obligation. You. I leaned my head on her shoulder. I choose you. I choose the Brennans. I choose the family that chose me first. Good answer, Mrs. Brennan. A year after the wedding, life had settled into something beautiful. Mara and I bought a house in Newton. A little Cape Cod with a big backyard. Just 15 minutes from Robert and Eleanor. Close enough for Sunday dinners. Far enough for privacy. My career had taken off. I'd been promoted to senior account director. Was making 6 figures for the first time in my life. Mara was thriving at her nonprofit. Building programs for LGBTQ youth. We were building a life together. Literally and figuratively. And I was pregnant. We'd done IVF. Used an anonymous donor. The whole process had been expensive and exhausting and worth every second. Eleanor cried when we told her. Robert tried not to cry and failed. James's kids were already arguing about who would be the baby's favorite cousin. One Sunday afternoon, Eleanor and I were setting up the nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow, arranging tiny furniture that seemed impossibly small. "Have you thought about names?" Eleanor asked, holding up two different mobiles. "Emma," I said. "If it's a girl." Emma Rose Brennan. Eleanor's eyes welled up. "That's beautiful." "The Brennan part is non-negotiable," I smiled. "I want her to have the name of the family that chose her mother." Eleanor set down the mobile and pulled me into a hug. "You know," she said, "when I saw you sitting alone in that restaurant, I had no idea we'd end up here. I just saw someone who needed kindness. You saved my life that night." "No, sweetheart." She pulled back, holding my shoulders. "You saved yourself. We just showed you it was possible." I looked around the nursery. At the crib we'd picked out together. At the rocking chair Robert had built by hand. At the life I'd created with people who loved me unconditionally. I finally had everything I'd always wanted. I was home. 5 years to the day after I sat alone in Harborview Grill, I sat at the head of a very different table. The Brennan house was chaos. The best kind. Emma, now 6 months old, was being passed from lap to lap like a tiny drooling treasure. James's kids were playing some complicated card game in the corner. Rebecca was arguing with Mara about the proper way to carve a turkey. Robert was sneaking extra pie when he thought Eleanor wasn't looking. She was. "All right, everyone." Eleanor clapped her hands. "Before we eat, we need a toast." She raised her glass and looked at me. "Claire, would you do the honors?" I stood, Emma in my arms, and looked around the table at the family I'd found. The family that had found me. 5 years ago tonight, I said, I was sitting alone in a restaurant, wondering if I'd ever belong anywhere. I thought I was unlovable. I thought there was something wrong with me. That I was too much. Too difficult. Too dramatic. I paused, feeling Mara's hand squeeze my knee under the table. Then a stranger named Eleanor Brennan came up to my table and said, "No one should eat alone on this day." And everything changed. Robert wiped his eyes. Eleanor was already crying. "So here's my toast." I raised my glass. To family. Not the one we're born into, but the one we build. The one we choose. The one that chooses us back. To family, everyone echoed. Glasses clinked. Emma gurgled. Robert finally got his extra piece of pie. And I looked around at these people, my people, and felt something I'd spent my whole childhood chasing. I belonged. Completely. Unconditionally. For the first time in my life, I was home. If you're watching this and you've been the scapegoat of your family, if you've been told you're too much or too sensitive or always causing drama just because you dared to ask to be treated fairly, I want you to know something. It's not you. It never was. You deserve to be chosen. Not as a backup. Not as a last resort. Not as the acceptable sacrifice when someone else's comfort is at stake. Chosen first. Chosen fully. Chosen without conditions. Family isn't blood. Family isn't obligation. Family isn't people who share your DNA but treat you like a burden. Family is the people who show up. The people who see you crying alone at a restaurant table and invite you to join them. The people who open their Sunday dinners and their hearts and their legal documents to make you officially, permanently, undeniably theirs. I spent 27 years trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it. And then I spent 5 years learning what love actually looks like. Not from the family I was born into, but from the family that chose me. If the people who are supposed to love you can't do that, if they've proven over and over again that you'll always come last, you have the right to build your own family. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to be happy. That's not revenge. That's not drama. That's just living your life without people who don't deserve a seat at your table. I found my people. And I hope with all my heart that you find yours too. You deserve it. Thank you so much for being here until the very end. If my story touched you in any way, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. It really helps more people find these stories. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with your own family? Share your experience in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, check the description. I've linked some of my favorites there. Until next time, remember, you deserve to be chosen.